There's different types of penetration testing. Black box testing assumes no prior knowledge of the infrastructure to be tested. So the testers must first determine the location and the extent of the systems before commencing their analysis. Right? The black box testing is also useful in cases where the tester assumes the role of an outside hacker, then tries to intrude into a system without adequate knowledge of the system. At the other end of the spectrum here is white box testing. So white box testing provides the tester with complete knowledge of the infrastructure to be tested, often including network diagrams, source code, and IP addressing information. This also will assume the role of an inside threat, also known as the insider, also known as the disgruntled employee. Right? Very important. And there's also several variations between, which are often known as gray box testing. Now, again, the black box testing would be a black hat hacker type thing, right? So we only have one piece of information a lot of times, which is either a name, a phone number, URL, a domain name for the target, and so forth. In the white box, we generally will have even username and passwords for domain admins, things like that. All right. Other things to remember is hacking methodology. There's 5 phases, and the phases need to be known in order. We have what's called reconnaissance. This is basically where we go in and we intelligently work off obtaining information either passively or actively. And passively we mean by sniffing traffic, by eavesdropping, by looking over someone's shoulder. Right? Actively, where here I'm mentioning Aaron and whois databases, which we'll talk about later when we talk about DNS and such, examining website HTML code and social engineering. And anyway, we'll have a whole module on reconnaissance and information gathering, footprinting, also known as, and it's definitely an interesting and one of my favorite topics. Then we get into scanning, second phase. This is identifying systems that are running on and the services active on them. We can do ping sweeps and port scans and so forth. There are definitely going to be port numbers we need to know about, and we'll hit those a few times throughout the course here. So make sure you have your port numbers down and what services there are running on those. The important thing about knowing port numbers is that when you look at a port scan using Nmap, your network mapper, you can identify if it's a Windows machine, if it's a Linux machine, if it's a printer, and things like that, all because of what ports are open on those machines or on those devices. So it's going to be very important that you know your port numbers. I would hate to have you go through the exam and get to a port number such as, let's say, what's the port number for Kerberos, and it is actually port 88, and it's used to authenticate users for a username and password when they log on to a domain environment. And I hate to have you miss a question similar to that, all because you didn't know that Kerberos runs on port 88, HTTP runs on port 80, SMTP runs on port 25, and those could be easy questions that you can answer if you happen to just know those port numbers. And again, there will be roughly 24 or so port numbers you need to remember and memorize. All right, now scanning side there too, again, second phase. We're going to be talking a lot about Nmap and the different switches and so forth. So my recommendation here is you get yourself more familiarized with Nmap. I'll be showing you a lot of these things too that we're talking about. So I'll be showing you different Nmap scans so you can see it. And if you have the ability, try it out on your own as well. See what different switches do what and what the output looks like and things like that. All right. Also, the third phase is called the gaining access phase, also known as the enumeration phase. This is where we exploit identifiable vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access. We a lot of times can do this through exploiting a buffer overflow or brute forcing a password and logging onto the system. And again, this is also one we're going to have a chapter on all by itself, and it's going to be called the enumeration chapter. And mainly here we're talking about null sessions and how to construct a null sessions and how that all works and what kind of things we can enumerate from that. Enumeration basically means is that we gain access through to a remote machine through means of like a null session type scenario. And again, we'll take a look into that and see what that looks like. All right, maintaining access is the fourth. There's uploading malicious software to ensure re-entry is possible. Here we do this by installing Trojan horses that implement a backdoor on the system, for instance. So we'll talk about Trojan horses, rootkits, things of that nature. And then we also mention things like steganography and things like that too. To be able to also kind of help cover our tracks when it comes down to that. So that's the fifth hacky phase, so steganography, fifth hack. You can carry out activities to hide one's malicious activities. We could do this by deleting or modifying data in system and application logs, and we'll talk about this again in the hacking Windows module, where we will talk about password cracking techniques and so forth. We'll mention rainbow tables and things like that. We'll also talk about hiding files, such as with ADS, your alternate data streams and so forth. I'll show you guys what that looks like. Steganography would be another, and things like that. So rootkits has its own little section there as well, but all that is coming into play when it comes down to that. So know the 5 phases in order: reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, also known as enumeration, maintaining access, and covering our tracks. So methodology for pen testing, basically we start off with footprinting. Right, we want to gather as much information, publicly available information as possible, and we can basically get this through Aaron, INNA, various websites and tools and so forth, and whatnot. Again, we'll have a whole section just on that. Again, the scanning portion, enumeration. We just talked about this, right? And then here we get into what's called the penetration side. Now, if the penetration fails, what generally will happen is we do a denial of service. And a lot of times this will happen in if it's in the malicious intent. So if the penetration fails for the malicious hacker, for instance, they'll do a denial of service attack possibly. And they basically say, hey, all else fails, and it's basically used as the last resort. So you did a good job on securing the system, and generally an unskilled hacker will stop there. But a lot of times the denial of service will then take the approach of, hey, if I can't have it, nobody can have it, kind of thing, right? Now, in a real pen test, however, unless authorized to do so, you will not be doing a denial of service attack if the penetration fails. All right, just to keep that in mind there. If the penetration is successful, right, then we can go in and possibly do things like elevation of privileges, the manipulation of data, right, covering our tracks and things like that. Right, so anyway, good stuff. All right, and of course, leave backdoors. And again, these could be your rootkits using tools like Netcat, which we'll be talking about as well, and having to know some things about on that. All right, and then some of the penetration testing methodologies that you need to know about. One is called the OSTEM, also known as the Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual. It can be found at the isacon.org/research/ostem.html site, and it will definitely assist you in how to do a pen test properly. It takes you through the step-by-steps and so forth. I would highly recommend that you check it out and at least glance over it at a bare minimum, and kind of get a feel of what the OSTEM is and so forth. NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies. This is going to be coming off of the SP 800-115, which is the Guide on Information Security Testing, which can be found at the csrc.nist.gov/publications/pubsps.html. Again, also highly recommend you at least take a peek at that. Then we have the FFIEC, which is your Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, Information Technology Examination. And it has an IT handbook that you can check out at the ithandbook.ffIEC.gov/IT-booklets/information-security.aspx and look for the information security booklet. Again, check it out. There are a couple hundred pages there, so unless you really like reading and you want to cover it out, you can. But for exam purposes, just browse through and kind of get a general idea of what it is and what it's able to do there. All right. The Information System Security Assessment Framework, ISSAF. This is by the Open Information System Security Group. You can check that out at the oissg.org website. All right, so let's take a real quick peek at the hacker versus a penetration tester. Now, the hacker here too would be considered the the black hat hacker, and the penetration tester here would be the white hat hacker, also known as the security analyst, right? So when it comes down to it, there's no code or ethics, motivated by greed, cause, or fame, depending on what type of hacker it is, right? We talked about the different types, and the important ones we needed to remember here are going to be the one like the script kiddies, the suicide hackers, right? And of course, then your black hat hackers. And such. So depending on what their cause of is to do that. Now, the penetration tester here obviously will follow a strict code of ethics. The hacker will gain illegal entry as an unauthorized entry, where the penetration tester has to have legal entry, must have authorization in writing even, right? Will try any technique without regards to loss. And again, they don't care if the server goes down and they lose data. However, the pen tester is defined to a set of boundaries which is defined before the pen test even starts. Black hat tries to bypass logging. Penetration tester needs to log and record all the activities. No report share or possibly shares exploits unless they're zero-day exploits. And these zero-day exploits are going to be exploits where there's no patch available. And a lot of times they will not share those. However, they may have the inkling of sharing those exploits after all, who knows, but a lot of times they will share those zero-day exploits to themselves. The pen tester here presents a detailed report of the test. The hacker will exploit vulnerabilities where the pen tester will try to correct those vulnerabilities. Of course, the hacker is the black hat bad guy, and the good guy, white hat, is going to be the penetration tester / security analyst. All right, so to kind of wrap us up on this intro is to look into things like not just the tools, right? You need to be able to do other things, be creative. And I usually refer to this as thinking outside the box, right? So you want to think outside the box. You want to be dynamic and also have a good, thorough understanding of the technology and tools that you are using out there. Because keep in mind, tools will only get you so far out there, and it's all great to say, hey, I got this tool that does everything for me. However, it is a good idea to be able to do some things manually to verify, because the tools, as I've seen in the field, they don't necessarily do 100% of a good job all the time. Example would be something like Saint, and it's a Linux-only tool for vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, and I've actually used it in the field where we got really good results on the vulnerability assessment side, but then when we used the penetration testing side of Saint, it came back with not so good results. And once we went in and manually verified, we were able to get in a whole lot more machines than what it found through the penetration testing on the tool side. So I'd highly recommend that yes, you can use tools, but I highly recommend that you actually go out there and test it out. Try it manually through different ways, methods, to see if you can actually penetrate some of the vulnerabilities, exploit those vulnerabilities type of thing. So, all right, now what we're going to be doing here next is we're going to get into some of the information gathering side, the reconnaissance footprinting side of things, and I'll be showing you guys some demos and show you guys how things are supposed to be looking and where we go and so forth. Again, keep in mind, everything in this course is designed to keep you on track specifically for the CEH exam. So make sure that you keep a hold of every little piece of information I give you, because it may be pertinent to your passing with a good score at the end. So keep in mind, you may not want to just use the video for your studies. Keep in mind, I'll be referencing different things, websites, and again, encouraging you all to go out there, try things out as we go through this as well, and hopefully you have the ability to do so. And again, that will just reinforce what we're talking about here. It's a great way to do it. And again, I've just to let you guys know, I've been doing the CEH for a very long time, and I've focused on usually bigger classes, 20 to 25 students, and out of those I usually have a 98% pass rate, meaning that only 1 or 2 students may not pass as they go through my classes on these. That's mainly due to the fact that they didn't study at home and so forth. So it is required for you to take some study time after watching the videos, maybe doing a little research and verifying some of the information for your own sake, and just kind of reinforcing it. Because again, the likelihood of you remembering something just by hearing it is only 10%, right? So what we're trying to do here is get your senses involved. The more senses, the more you're going to remember. So not only will you hear things, you're going to see things, and then hopefully you have the opportunity to do things as well. And here we're getting in, different senses that will help reinforce and help you also remember the information that's being covered. All right, there's a lot of good stuff, and as we continue on, I'll throw some sample questions out there, but keep in mind, everything I'm talking about, you should be able to answer any questions regarding these topics, and again, we'll give you some samples of that as we continue on. So let's go ahead and hop into the next section. Thank you very much, and we'll see you here in a moment.